Have you ever found yourself in the gym wondering how much weight you should be lifting? Or maybe you're a little bit more advanced and you're wondering how you can make sure that you are training to an intensity that is going to give you the results that you're after. Well, let me introduce you to RPE. RPE is the rate of perceived exertion, and it is a training methodology that uses a scale to auto-regulate training with intrinsic and real-time set-to-set feedback. I find it a really useful system to use, especially if your recovery levels can fluctuate based on a lot of life or work stress, because you can pair this really well with reps in reserve, which allows you to auto-regulate your intensity within a rep range. I find that rep ranges allow you to modulate your intensity with a little bit more flexibility than rep max percentages, which is something that I used a lot in college baseball, but I'll cover rep max percentages in another video and the pros and cons of that system. But for now, let's dive into RPE and rep ranges and how you can utilize that in your training. So RPE, aka rate of perceived exertion, is rated on a scale of 1 to 10. And this is something that you can use in weight training, in conditioning, if you're doing sprints, or if you're under the bar doing squats. The important thing to realize is that it's not just a subjective, I feel like this is hard, that was a 10. You should be up against the wall of what you're capable of doing and even going beyond that. Many people simply do not train hard enough. And one study found that 47% of participants had 6 or more reps left in the tank from what they thought their max bench press was. A 10 is a max effort 100-yard sprint with a killer chasing you. A 10 on a squat is doing the last rep possible in a life or death situation. And even then, if you're creating those situations in your head, you probably have an extra 5 or 10% left in the tank. One of the ways you can test your RPE levels and really get a sense of how close you are at estimating the intensity of a lift is to simply call out where you think you are when you're a few reps from failure. So in this example with my client, he calls out, I think I'm at an RPE 8.
That's an 8.
6, 8, all right. Come on, keep going. Keep going, you got one more. One more. From there, he goes to failure, and then we're able to see, okay, he's 1 rep away. That's much better than some people, as mentioned in the previous study, where they're 6 reps away from what they think a 10 is. And then you can do this over and over and really start to narrow in and get a good sense as to how far you are away from failure, truly. Now, as mentioned earlier, I like pairing this with the reps in reserve system because the two go hand in hand. RIR, aka reps in reserve, basically just means how many reps you have left in the tank, how many reps you are from failure. So if you're at a 2 RIR, you're basically at an 8 RPE, and that means you have 2 more reps until you hit failure. If you're at a 1 RIR, you're 1 rep away from failure. That's a 9. To tie all this together, I like incorporating rep ranges, which gives you a high and a low end of reps to target. I find that rep ranges are a helpful way to help with the subjectivity that can happen for RPE, especially with novice lifters, because it can be really arbitrary to just say, hey, you should do 8 reps of 40 pounds, go and get after it. That 8 reps at 40 pounds could be too light, could be too heavy, it could be just the right amount. But this allows you to flex within a rep range of, let's say, 6 to 10, 8 to 12, 10 to 15. And then you find that RIR or that RPE within that rep range. Here's how this would work for shoulder press. Let's say you have 4 sets of 6 to 10 reps programmed for shoulder press at an RPE of 8, aka a RIR target of 2. And you start with 40-pound dumbbells. First set, you knock out 10, easy, no problem, great. Promote yourself to 45. This time you can only do 9 reps at an 8 RPE. Great. Now you know how much weight you should target for your next set, but also how much weight you should target for the next time you do shoulder press a week later. This enables what is called a double progression because you can either progress in the weight or you can progress in the reps. So as you're going from 40, 45, 50, you're progressing there. But you can also progress in your rep schemes. You can go from 6 reps, 7 reps, 8 reps. This enables you to chase progressive overload and increase your volume over time while still staying in an intensity target that's gonna help you build muscle. Now, what if you grab a weight and you can only do 6 reps and your target's 8 to 12? Well, just demote yourself down 5 or 10 pounds and then work with that weight until you find yourself in that rep range, hitting that RPE target. Here's another reason why I find this really helpful. As mentioned earlier, some days you're gonna feel great, some days you're not. So there could be a 5, 10, 15 pound difference in your set after you get on a plane, you take a red eye, and you wake up the next morning and go and work out. Compared to the person who slept in, they had a nice breakfast, they digest it, and then they go and work out. 2 completely different Saturdays, two completely different recovery levels, but now you can flex within the intensity that you need based on how you're feeling. So here's what this would look like in a 4-week cycle with back squat specifically. Week 1, you have an RPE target of 7. That means 3 reps in reserve. So we're gonna do 3 sets of 5 to 8. First set, you do 8 at 200, then you lift a little bit more, you add 10 pounds, 8 at 210, and then you find after that third set, you do 6 at 210. Sweet, you found a sweet spot for the weight that you're gonna be using for the cycle. Week 2, you bump up the RPE. Now it's at an 8, 2 reps in reserve. You do the same 3 sets, 5 to 8, you do 7 at 210, 7 at 210, 5 at 210. Great, you've increased intensity and you're fatiguing towards the end, which is a good sign that you're at the right weight. Week 3, we stay at RPE 8, 2 reps in reserve, but we increase the volume by adding another set. Now you're doing 4 sets of 5 to 8. You do 7 at 210, 7 at 210, then you do 6 at 210, and 6 at 210 in the 4 set. You've now increased sets and you're getting stronger with some fatigue towards the end. Week 4, you bump it up to a RPE of 9, 1 rep in reserve. You stay at the 4 sets and you're in a 5 to 8 rep range. 8 reps at 210, 6 at 215, because you felt good, you bumped up, 5 at 215, 5 at 215. You've increased intensity and you're getting close to maxing out with that rep scheme. Now you might be watching this and you might be thinking, wow, this is a lot of great information, but I'm a beginner. Does this really apply to me? And I'd say for most beginners, I wouldn't worry about lifting to failure or getting to an 8, 9 RPE every single time. An RPE of 7 to 8 is gonna be ideal for building muscle, but at the end of the day, you should really just focus on nailing down really good form. And I'd consider anyone who's been lifting for 2 or fewer years and hasn't been following a structured training plan during that time as a beginner. So like I said, just focus on good form and get to a 7 or 8 and you're gonna see progress. But make sure, obviously, you gotta be consistent. Let's say you're someone who's been doing a lot of group classes or you've been just going to the gym and winging it for 5, 6, 7 years. I would still consider you a beginner because at the end of the day, you're likely not following the structure. You're likely not getting to a degree of muscle failure and fatigue that you need to. You might be thinking to yourself, oh, I feel gassed all the time in my HIIT workouts. Well, what you're feeling and experiencing is much more likely to be cardiovascular failure and that you're not getting enough oxygen and that's causing you to stop or that's causing you to put a weight down. There's a big difference between being huffing and puffing, your heart rate's through the roof and needing to stop versus no longer being able to lift a weight. So in review, a few of the cons of the RPE system is that it can be subjective. You are never going to be able to perfectly predict or perfectly say that was a 7, that was an 8, that was a 9. And so there can be a good degree of variance in that, especially for novice lifters. Another one is that it can seem like a lot of information. If you're doing a squat, for example, you got the weight on the bar, you have reps in reserve, you have RPE, you have your sets, you have your rep ranges. It can sound like a lot. It's a lot of numbers, all for just one exercise. But at some point, reading a book was overwhelming and you got up to speed on that. So I'd encourage you to still really work on applying this because you're gonna start to be able to digest it easier. As mentioned throughout the video, a lot of the pros around the RPE system is gonna be that it allows you to auto-regulate your intensity day to day, and it allows you to really get a good sense of where you're at relative to failure. I mentioned earlier that it is subjective, but the more you practice it, the closer you get to being objective. And anyone who's an athlete, anyone who's lifting for an extended period of time is going to get really good at identifying that they are 2 reps away from failure. And then that's something that you can always use to understand how hard you are training in the gym. Thanks for watching. Drop any comments or questions down below in the comments. If you got value out of this video, I'd appreciate it if you left a like and hit the subscribe button for future videos. My name is Paul Klingen. I'll catch you on the next Return of the Athlete video.